What if the Blackfish escaped the Red Wedding with Robb's crown and carried it to the war for Jon Snow? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The night outside the Twins is cool and damp. The river smells thick in the air. Torches burn along the outer walls, their light broken by shadows where the stonework juts and recesses. The Blackfish stands in the outer yard, away from the feast, as he often stands away from feasts. He is a soldier first, and a guest second, and soldiers do not let their backs settle comfortably into cushioned chairs when they are inside another man's walls. He watches the yard. He watches the gates. He watches the guards change and notes the ones who do not look like Frey men, the ones whose cloaks sit wrong on their shoulders, the ones who keep glancing toward the great hall. Then the music shifts. He hears it clearly. The Rains of Castamere, the Lannister anthem, the song written to commemorate the destruction of House Rain, a house that dared defy Tywin Lannister and was erased from the earth for the insult. Every great house knows that song. Every great house knows what it means. It means ruin. It means Lannister. It means that whatever came before is over now. No one plays that song at a northern wedding. No one plays that song in a hall full of stark bannermen by accident. It is not a mistake. There is no musician alive in the Seven Kingdoms careless enough to make that mistake. He is moving before the thought fully forms. He finds a narrow window on the hall's east face, one story up, and what he sees through it confirms everything the song already told him. Frey soldiers are rising between the tables, blades out. Northern men are reaching for weapons that are no longer at their hips. The doors at the far end are barred from outside. He sees crossbow bolts in the air, brief and final. He sees men falling who had no chance to stand. This is not a brawl that broke out over an insult. This is not two drunk men throwing fists. This is organized. Every movement has been planned. Every step was decided before the first cup was poured. The Freys knew exactly what they were doing, and they have been doing it, quietly and carefully, for however long it took to set the trap. He does not go back inside. There is nothing inside to go back to. He drops from the window ledge and lands cleanly, an old soldier's habit of landing quietly still intact in his grey-haired body. He is lean and tough, still quick at the corners, the kind of man who does not announce himself when he moves. He has 40 years of war in his joints, and none of that time has made him slow in the moments that count. Then, Grey Wind screams. It is not a howl. It is a cut-short snarl, a sound that starts as fury and ends as nothing. The sound of something large and alive, becoming suddenly still. The Blackfish does not see the wolf. He does not need to. He knows that sound. He has heard animals die for 4 decades on battlefields and in hunting yards and outside castle walls. And he knows the exact quality of a sound that does not finish. Grey Wind is Robb's wolf. Grey Wind has never been apart from Robb by any great distance. If the wolf is dead in the outer yard, then Robb is dead or dying inside the hall. And there is nothing the Blackfish can do about that now. He has just lost his king. He has just lost his nephew. The crown of the North has just lost its head. He stops himself from thinking further in that direction. There is no time for grief, and there will not be for a long while. His first instinct is River Run. It is always River Run, south along the river road. High walls, deep water on 3 sides, a castle that has never fallen to direct assault. He knows River Run, the way he knows his own hands. He could hold it against a siege for a year, possibly 2. It is the right answer in almost every situation. Except this one. Roose Bolton will have riders on the southern road before the last body cools inside that hall. Every man who knows the Blackfish by name will be watching the roads toward Riverrun, because Riverrun is the obvious answer, and obvious answers are traps laid by the shape of the world. He could reach Riverrun. He might even hold it for a season, but there is no king left to relieve him, and no host left to break a siege. The Stark army is gone. Robb is gone. He would sit inside those high walls and watch his supplies shrink, and watch his garrison thin, and eventually die with nothing accomplished, slowly rather than quickly. Which is the worst possible way to die for a cause that needed something better? He stands still for 3 heartbeats and thinks, the crown is here. Robb's traveling gear is in an outbuilding on the east side of the yard, 30 feet from where he stands. He knows this because he always knows where the king's effects are. He has known since they arrived. He marked the outbuilding the way he marks every useful thing inside walls he does not control, the way he has marked exits and postern gates and blind corners for the whole of his adult life. Because the Blackfish does not trust comfort, and he does not trust hospitality. And 40 years of war taught him that the man who plans his exit before the feast begins is the man who gets to leave. He moves to the outbuilding. The door is unlatched. Inside, among saddlebags and rolled maps and the practical gear of a traveling royal party, he finds what he is looking for, wrapped in oilcloth. He pulls back the cloth, a hammered bronze circlet, incised with runes of the first men, surmounted by 9 black iron spikes shaped like longswords, the crown of the kings in the north. It is heavier than it looks, and it is cold to the touch, the bronze chilled by the night air. He wraps it again in a riding cloak and tucks it against his body. Jon Snow is at Castle Black, Robb's bastard half-brother, the one who took the black, the one who chose a different kind of service. He is far north, at the top of the King's Road, on the other side of the world from here. The Blackfish does not know exactly what he intends to do when he gets there. He only knows the direction. He only knows that a dead king's crown should not stay inside Frey walls, that it should not disappear into a Bolton strongroom, that it should not be melted down and used to plate some Lannister cup. The crown belongs somewhere north of here, somewhere it can mean something, somewhere it can be a reason rather than a relic. 2 northern soldiers are in the yard near the stable. They are mounted and armed, and they look like men who heard something wrong a few minutes ago and have not yet decided what to do about it. He goes to them. He does not explain. He says 3 words: ride north. Now. They ride. He has marked the postern gate on the wall's northwest face since the first afternoon they arrived. He knows where it is in the dark. He knows which guard is stationed there, and he knows that guard is not at his post because every Frey soldier in this castle has been called to do something else tonight. The gate is unlatched. They go through it at a trot, and then a canter, and then a full gallop as soon as the ground opens up beneath them. Behind him, the twins burn with torchlight, every window blazing, the sounds of the feast hall still carrying faintly across the night air. He does not look back. He does not allow himself to look back. He rides north with the crown of the kings in the north pressed hard against his ribs, and he does not yet have a plan. Only a direction and an instinct, and the specific, irreversible weight of a dead king's legacy riding with him into the dark. Dawn comes grey and wet over the riverlands, the sky the color of old iron, the fields below it dark and soaked from overnight rain. The Blackfish rides at the front of a company of 3, his posture straight despite the hours in the saddle, his eyes moving across the landscape with the steady, methodical sweep of a man who has spent a lifetime watching for things that want to kill him. They have been riding since midnight. He has not slept. There is nothing in his face that suggests he particularly needs to. He keeps them off the King's Road. The road is faster, Yes, 2 miles of flat-packed earth, for every 3 they cover picking through the river brush east of the Trident. But the road is watched, and the road will be more watched once the twins realizes what is left with the dawn. P sets the pace himself. Not too fast, not too slow. The kind of pace a horse can hold across a long day without breaking down. Speed that burns your horses in the morning means walking by afternoon, and walking men get caught. He was a soldier before most of these men were born. He knows what pace wins a long march. By mid-morning, the Frey horsemen appear. They ride the King's Road in a loose column, a dozen riders or more, moving north at a canter. The Blackfish sees them from the tree line before they are close enough to hear, which is the only kind of seeing that matters. He raises one hand, and the company goes still. The horses feel the stillness from their riders and drop their heads, cropping at the wet grass. The Frey men ride past on the road above, outlined against the white sky, searching the open ground ahead, and never once looking toward the tree line, and the shadow and the 3 men watching them from inside it. The Blackfish watches them go. He does not exhale with relief. He does not look relieved at all. Roose Bolton wanted him caught, and he had expected nothing less. The pursuit is organized. Riders dispatched at the first light, a search pattern that makes sense if you assume your quarry is still on the main road moving fast. The assumption is wrong, and that is what matters. He waits until the hoofbeats are gone before he moves again. He knows this ground. He has known this ground since before these Frey riders were old enough to sit a horse. Decades of service to House Tully, the wars and the border skirmishes, and the long seasons of campaign up and down the riverlands. Robert's rebellion, when the whole country was burning. And you learned quickly where the fords were, where the thickets ran deep enough to swallow a column, where the willows grew so thick along the water that the light disappeared entirely in summer. He leads them down to a shallow crossing well east of the main bridge, the water cold and fast over flat stones, and he takes them through it slowly, hooves finding purchase on the riverbed, the willows closing over them like a curtain pulled shut. They come out the other side, dripping and quiet. The road above them is empty. Near a small holdfast on the north bank of the river, they find survivors. 5 men on foot, some of them still wearing half armor, pieces of kit they had not managed to shed in whatever they walked away from. They carry themselves like men who are not sure yet if they are still alive. When the Blackfish rides out of the brush toward them, they reach for weapons, and then stop reaching, recognizing what they see. An old man with grey hair, and a soldier's bearing, and eyes that have seen worse than whatever they are about to tell him. They tell him in pieces. Men carry bad news, the way they carry weight that is too heavy for one trip. Robb Stark is dead, stabbed by Roose Bolton at the feast table inside Walder Frey's hall. Catelyn Stark is dead, her throat cut before the hall went quiet. The last act in a long and deliberate night. Talisa is dead, stabbed before the music stopped. Grey Wind is dead, cut down in the outer yard where the wolf could not reach his king. Most of the northern host is dead or scattered, the army that marched south with Robb Stark, the finest force the North had fielded in a generation. Gone in one night between the soup course and the dancing. The men who survived the outer camp did so because they were far enough from the walls when it started, or because the Frey soldiers had not reached them yet, or simply because something random and undeserved had placed them outside the kill. One of the 5 men sits down on the ground when he is done speaking and does not try to get up. The Blackfish looks at him for 30 seconds, measuring something that has nothing to do with sympathy. Then he tells the man to get on a horse. The man gets on a horse. There are 7 of them now, and they ride. They make a cold camp before evening, well off any road, in a stand of trees, where the ground is dry enough and the branches close enough overhead that a man on horseback 50 yards away would ride past without seeing them. No fire. The light from a fire carries farther than most men think, and the men who are looking for them know how to use their eyes. The Blackfish has been carrying something pressed against his body since he left the twins. A bundle wrapped in cloth, not large, the shape of it suggesting something flat and circular. He sets it on the ground between the 7 of them and folds back the cloth. The crown of the kings in the north sits in the wet grass. It is a hammered bronze circlet, incised with runes of the first men, worn smooth by handling over centuries of use. 9 black iron spikes rise from it, shaped like long swords, each one slightly different from the last. The work of hands, long dead. It is not a beautiful thing in the way that southern crowns are beautiful, made for ceremony and display, and the flattery of goldsmiths. It is a serious thing, a thing made to be recognized. None of the 7 men speak for a moment. Then the Blackfish speaks. Robb's bastard half-brother Jon Snow is at Castle Black, at the far northern end of the King's Road, a man of the Night's Watch. He is a steward, sworn to the Watch, the last living Stark that any of them can account for, with any certainty. The crown goes to Jon Snow, or it goes into a Frey ditch, and those are the only 2 choices that remain to anyone in this company. One of the men asks if a bastard can be a king. The Blackfish looks at him for a long moment. Robb was a king, he says. He wasn't one until his lords made him one. That's how it works. He tells them what is ahead. The neck, where the only land road north runs through Moat Cailin, and Moat Cailin is held by Ironborn fighting under Balon Greyjoy's orders, which means the gate into the north is closed to anything that looks like a column of soldiers. The north itself, which Roose Bolton now holds by Lannister appointment as Warden of the North, with Bolton riders on every road and eyes in every market town along the way. And then the wall itself, farther north than most men in this company have ever traveled in their lives. He does not make it sound easy. He does not make it sound impossible either. He says they will move at night when the dark gives them cover, off the road when the road is too dangerous, and they will find a way through the neck when they reach it, one problem at a time. That is how a long march works. Most of these men have never been north of the neck. None of them say they are turning back. The Blackfish wraps the crown in its cloth again and presses it back against his body, close as a heartbeat. He looks up at the sky through the branches above the camp. Still some light left. They will wait 1 more hour. Then they will move. The riverlands fall behind them over the course of 3 days. The land flattens first, then softens. Trees grow shorter and more sparse. The road becomes uncertain, the packed earth giving way to something darker and less reliable underfoot. By the 2nd morning, the air has changed entirely, thick with peat and still water, a smell like something old and undrained. The horses start picking their feet up higher than the ground requires, a cautious habit born from instinct. The company rides slower now, not from caution, but because the animals feel the change beneath them and do not trust what they cannot see. No one speaks about it. They all feel it too. Through the morning mist, the ruins of Moat Cailin emerge from the grey. 3 broken towers stand on a causeway above the bog, their stonework crumbling but still carrying the weight of old authority. The Children's Tower leans slightly to the east. The Gatehouse Tower still has most of its upper courses intact. The Drunkard's Tower is the worst of the 3. Its top floors long collapsed, its base black with age and water damage. Once this fortress held off the full strength of southern armies. Now its stones are moss-covered, and its walls gap-toothed. But the causeway is real. The causeway is the only land route north through the neck, and the causeway is held. The Blackfish goes ahead alone, on foot. He leaves his horse with the company at the tree line, and moves through the reed beds at the causeway's edge, picking his way with the patience of a man who has spent his life reading ground. He is grey-haired and lean, and he moves without noise. He gets close enough to count. Iron-born soldiers man the causeway, perhaps 30, scattered between the towers and the gate. 30 is not a large number for a garrison, but 30 armed men on a narrow bridge with crossbows is enough to stop an army. It is more than enough to stop 7. He watches for a time, noting the pattern of their movement, the position of their crossbowmen, the gaps in their watch. There are no gaps worth using. The Ironborn are sea raiders by blood and habit. They know a killing ground when they are standing on one. They pace it with the ease of men who have held worse positions in worse weather, and they do not look bored. Bored men make mistakes. These men are not bored. There is no gate to bribe, and no garrison captain who will negotiate. Balon Greyjoy's men answer to Balon Greyjoy, and Balon Greyjoy answers to no one south of the sea. The Blackfish goes back through the reed beds to the company and tells them simply, they are not going through Moat Cailin. He has heard of other ways. In years of campaigning, soldiers pass knowledge around fires, the way they pass wine, carefully, and only to men they trust. The Cranogmen of the Neck are the source of it, a folk who live in the bogs and know the neck the way a man knows his own hand in the dark. They have never mapped their paths. They have never needed to. The roots exist only in memory and habit, passed from parent to child for generations. Narrow trails between the reed beds, wet roads through the deeper channels, ground that looks like nothing from above and means everything to a man who grew up reading bog water by color and smell. The neck is nearly impassable, they say. The Blackfish has learned not to give his enemies that word. Nearly is where the work is. He tells the company. They go around, 3 days on foot or close to it, leading the horses when the ground is firm enough and abandoning the path when it is not. They will come out north of the causeway, past the Ironborn, inside the north. The company takes this without complaint. Complaint would change nothing. The first day in the bog is the worst and the least dangerous at the same time. The ground is never solid. Cold water seeps into boots within the first hour, and it stays there for the rest of the crossing, a constant wet weight that sloshes with every step. The Blackfish goes ahead with a staff cut from the reeds, probing the ground before each stride, finding the hard surface beneath the soft-looking skin of water and mud. He moves like a man who has done harder things, which he has. The company follows in single file, stepping exactly where he steps. They do not speak. The bog does not reward distraction. On the second day, one of the horses breaks its leg. It is a step that looks like every other step until it is not. A hidden channel beneath the surface, 2 feet of black water under 6 inches of mud that holds firm until it does not. Then there is a crack. The horse screams. It goes down sideways, taking the rider into the water with it. They pull the rider clear. The horse cannot be cleared. Its leg is broken at the cannon bone, the angle wrong and final. The Blackfish does what has to be done. He does it quickly and quietly, and the sound is small compared to the screaming the horse would have done. The company moves on. 6 men, 5 horses, and the bog stretching north without visible end. On the 3rd day, one of the northern soldiers begins to shiver in a way that has nothing to do with the cold air. By midday, he is moving slowly. By late afternoon, his hands are shaking and his eyes are too bright, lit from inside, in the way fever lights a man's eyes when the fever is winning. Bog water gets into everything, cuts, mouths, eyes if a man is not careful enough, and sometimes careful enough is not a standard the bog respects, the company keeps moving. There is no stopping in the middle of the neck. They emerge north of the neck as the sun goes down on the third day. 6 men and 5 horses, wet through and bone-tired, standing on ground that holds their weight without sinking. The Blackfish looks south across the reed beds and the dark water. The towers of Moat Cailin are invisible from here, hidden behind distance and mist. The Ironborn on the causeway never knew they were there. He turns north without ceremony. Everything from here belongs to Roose Bolton now, named Warden of the North by Lannister appointment and flying the flayed man sigil on every road and garrison between here and Winterfell. The Blackfish tells the company what this means in plain terms. They ride carefully. They speak to no one they have not already spoken to. Any man asking questions on the road will be a Bolton man. Bolton men do not ask questions out of curiosity. They trust no banner that shows the flayed man on pink. The soldier with the fever cannot hold a straight seat by the next morning. The Blackfish spots a farmstead off the road before midday. A small place, a family, smoke from the chimney of a house that wants nothing to do with anyone's war, and has the look of a place that has survived by staying quiet through several wars already. He takes the sick man there alone and speaks to the family briefly. Then he speaks to the sick man. He tells him what story to give. A traveler caught in bad weather near the neck, sick from the damp. He gives him enough silver for a month of food and quiet. He tells him to wait and say nothing. He does not tell him the company is coming back. He does not know if they are. The sick man understands this. He has soldiered long enough to know what an honest farewell sounds like, and what a false promise of return sounds like. And he has been given the honest kind. He takes the silver and the honesty behind it without complaint, which is a soldier's answer to a soldier's offer. With that, the Blackfish rides back to the road. The company continues north. 5 men and 5 horses, 1 wrapped crown in a saddlebag, and the wall still many days ahead of them. The road is quiet. The Bolton banners will start appearing before long. Until then, there is only the grey sky and the muddy track and the sound of hooves on cold ground, pressing north. The land changes the moment they cross into the north. It does not announce itself with fanfare or signal fires. It simply becomes quieter, heavier, as if the air itself is holding its breath. The holdfasts they pass are shut, gates barred, chimneys cold. No children run out to watch them pass. No dogs bark. The people inside those walls know that strangers on the road mean danger, and they have made their choice to wait in the dark and hope trouble moves on without stopping. The Blackfish watches each holdfast as they ride past it. He is a man who has spent his life reading walls and knowing what they mean. These walls are saying something plain. Word of the Red Wedding has arrived here before them, and it has done its work. Some holdfasts still carry banners but not flying. The grey dire wolf on white that Robb Stark marched under has been folded away, tucked inside on a shelf somewhere, kept but hidden. Others have already made their peace with the new order. The flayed man on pink hangs from their posts instead. The Bolton sigil, the sign of the man, Roose Bolton, planted in the north after the Red Feast, after the knives, after everything. Most of the north is bending. The silence of its holdfasts is its own kind of answer to a question nobody asked aloud. They ride without talking much. 5 men and what they carry between them. The road is quiet enough that a single voice would carry too far. Off the main road, behind a stand of pine trees gone silver with age, sits a smaller holdfast. No banner at all, just a gate half open and a yard full of geese. The Blackfish turns his horse toward it before anyone asks why. An old man comes out. He stops when he sees the grey-haired figure at the front of the company, and he does not say anything for a moment. Then he takes his hat off. He served in Robb Stark's army. He was sent home 2 years before the war ended. Too old for the march south, too stiff-jointed for the field, but loyal to his marrow in the way only old soldiers stay loyal once the cause has gotten into them. He knows the Blackfish by sight. He has known him for 20 years. He brings them inside. He feeds them. He does not ask questions about what they are carrying, and the Blackfish does not volunteer it. When the food is gone and the fire is going, the old man tells them what he knows. Bolton riders came through twice in the past week. They were asking about a grey-haired Tully knight riding north. They described him well. The lean build, the soldier's bearing, the way he sits a horse. They were not asking the way men ask about strangers. They were asking the way men ask about a target they already have the shape of. The Blackfish is being hunted, not blindly, systematically, by men who know exactly who they are looking for, because someone told them who to look for. Roose Bolton wants him found. That much is plain. The company sits with this information for a moment. Then, one of the soldiers says what everyone is thinking. He says they should go to White Harbour. White Harbour is the only proper city north of the Neck. Walls, port, population. The lord who holds it commands resources no smaller house can match. If any northern lord has the means to shelter them, feed them, and eventually move against the Boltons, it is the lord there. Make contact. See if he can be moved to act. The Blackfish shakes his head. White Harbour is watched, he says. Any lord with the resources to help them is also visible enough for Bolton eyes to be on him already. The lord of that city may have his own thoughts about the Red Wedding and what it means. The Blackfish has heard things. The way soldiers hear things when information moves through kitchens and stables instead of through councils. But a fire that is still smouldering gets snuffed out the moment you expose it to the wrong wind. He does not say the Lord's name aloud in the old man's house. He only says, "The crown goes to Castle Black first. Everything else follows that." Or, it does not follow at all. Nobody argues. The soldiers have learned when his voice carries a door closing in it. The old man has a family raven, a bird kept for messages to a cousin near the Neck, not a proper maester's bird trained for great distances, but ravens know north when they fly it. Castle Black's rookery is well established, and birds find it. They have for hundreds of years. The Blackfish borrows ink and paper. He sits at the old man's table and thinks for a long moment before he writes. The message has to carry meaning to one reader and none to anyone else who gets their hands on it. He writes 7 words. The wolf's pup should know. He ties the message to the bird's leg himself. He carries the bird out into the grey morning yard and opens his hands. He watches it go up. He keeps his eyes on it as it climbs and bends north, growing smaller against the overcast sky, until it is too small to find. Then he stands there a moment longer, as if watching the empty space where it was still counts as watching it. A raven in good conditions flies 1,000 miles in 3 or 4 days. Jon Snow will have the message before the Blackfish reaches the wall, if the bird flies true. Jon will not know what to make of it at first, but Jon Snow is not a stupid man, and he will have time to think it through. By the time the Blackfish arrives, Jon will have had days to turn those 7 words over and begin to understand them. That evening, sitting around the old man's fire, with full stomachs and the night pressing at the shutters, one of the soldiers asks the question that has been sitting unspoken since the twins. He asks it plainly because they are far enough from safe ground that polite silence is a luxury. He asks, will any lord in the north actually rise for a bastard? Jon Snow is a Snow, not a Stark. He has no legal claim to any title, any seat, any army. The northern lords bent the knee to Robb because Robb carried a name they had followed for 300 years. Jon Snow carries a sword and a black cloak. The Night's Watch swears to take no part in the politics of the realm. They swear to that at the wall, and mean it. What is the argument for Jon Snow that moves a lord with sons and lands and his own survival to think about? The Blackfish sets down his cup. He says, that guest right was broken at the Twins. Bread and salt were offered under Walder Frey's roof. Every man who accepted that hospitality was protected by the oldest law in Westeros. Older than the faith of the Seven. Older than the Iron Throne. Older than anything the Andals carried across the narrow sea when they came. The old gods made that law, and the old gods remember every breach of it. The North knows this. Every lord who still bends his knee to weirwood trees knows what the phrase did and what it means. Before the gods, any lord who now bows to the Boltons bows to men who stood in that hall when the knives came out and called themselves satisfied. He aligns himself with the breakers of guest, right in full sight of the gods who named that crime, the worst one a man can commit, under his own roof. That is the argument. Not Jon Snow's name. Not any legal claim. Just the word twins, and a man who still has his gods in him. One of the soldiers says that argument works on free lords. It will not move a man whose sons are sitting in a Bolton dungeon. The Blackfish nods once. He says he knows the difference. He is not trying to move every lord in the north. He only needs enough of them. Enough is a smaller number than most people think when the cause is right and the gods are watching. The fire burns low. Nobody speaks after that for a while. They leave before first light. The old man stands in his dark yard and watches them go without a word. The Blackfish does not look back. Looking back is not something he allows himself on a road like this one. The wall is many days north. The roads are Bolton roads, watched and full of ears that report back to Roose. They ride without banners. 5 men moving fast and quiet across a country that has already decided which way it will bend. Above them, somewhere in the grey sky ahead, a bird is winging north with a message that means nothing to anyone who intercepts it and everything to the one man who needs to read it. Jon Snow wears black again. He walks the wall's shadow in the early morning, breath-fogging in cold air, and he looks like a brother of the Night's Watch, because he is one. He came back. He made his choice. But Castle Black is not what it was when he left, and what it was when he left was already not good. Chior Mormont is dead, the Lord Commander, the old bear, the man who gave Jon Longclaw and called him worth something. Dead at Craster's Keep, stabbed by his own men during the great ranging beyond the wall. Men of the Night's Watch killed their own commander. Jon thinks about that most mornings and cannot make it mean less than it means. There is no Lord Commander now. There is only Alliser Thorne, who holds the garrison together by force of will and the weight of his own contempt for anyone who disagrees with him. Thorne was not elected. Everyone knows it. He acts as though he was, and most men are too tired and too scared to argue. The watch is broken in ways that will not be fixed by an election. Half the men who rode out on the Great Ranging never came back. The garrison is thin. The officers argue about who has authority over what, and who should send ravens to King's Landing, and what those ravens should say. Jon does his duties. He patrols. He trains. He keeps his head down and watches the institution he swore his life to come apart from the inside, one argument at a time. He does not know what to do about any of it. He only knows the wall is at his back, and something worse than Thorn's politics is north of it. Mance Rayder's army is massing. Jon knows this because he spent months among the free folk. He learned their language and their fireside customs, and the way they speak about the South, with a hunger that is not quite greed. He killed a man he had called brother to prove himself to them. He learned what drives 90 tribes and more to move together when they have never moved together before. It is not ambition. It is not hunger. It is fear. Something is gathering in the far north, something that makes the wildlings want to be south of the wall when it arrives, and Mance Rayder has done the thing no king beyond the wall has ever done. He has convinced thousands of free folk that running is the right choice. Jon told the Watch what he knows. He stood in front of officers who looked at him like he was a boy playing at importance, and he laid it out plainly. The scale of the force, the reason behind it, the fact that whatever is driving the wildlings south is something the Watch should be more afraid of than the wildlings themselves. Most of the officers did not fully believe him. The ones who did were frightened enough to argue about it rather than prepare for it. Jon stopped trying to make them listen. He is still waiting for them to start. In the evenings he sits with Ghost. The direwolf is the one steady thing at Castle Black. Ghost is big now, bigger than any dog Jon has ever seen, white as new snow and completely silent. He goes where Jon goes and asks nothing and requires nothing except proximity. Jon sometimes thinks Ghost is the only creature at Castle Black who has no opinion about what Jon should do or who Jon should be. Ghost simply is. Jon envies him that. Jon looks south most evenings. Robb is down there. Or was. He has had no word from his brother in weeks. Sansa is in King's Landing, which means she is in a place Jon cannot reach, even if he were free to try. Arya is somewhere he does not know, which is the worst of it, because not knowing means imagining, and what he imagines when he imagines Arya alone somewhere in the south is not something he can sit with for long. The wall is very far north. The distance between Castle Black and anything Jon loves sits on him some evenings, like stone. Maester Aemon calls him to the rookery on a grey afternoon. 2 ravens have come. The rookery smells of bird and old wood, and the particular cold that gathers in high places. And Aemon stands in the middle of it, with his hands folded and his blind eyes pointed somewhere past Jon's shoulder. He holds out the first message. It came from the south, a small holdfast, near the neck, tied with a plain strip of undyed cloth. The handwriting is cramped and careful, the kind of handwriting someone uses when they are trying very hard not to be understood by the wrong eyes. Jon reads it. The fish swims north. The wolf's pup should know. He stands with it in his hand and works through it. A fish is a Tully, the Tullys of Riverrun, the family his mother came from, the family whose banners rode alongside Robb's grey wolves. A wolf's pup is a Stark. Someone from the Tully line is moving north and wants Jon to know about it. Jon turns it over twice. He does not know what a Tully would be carrying north, or why it would matter to him specifically, or how whoever sent this message knew to send it to Castle Black. He files it away and looks up at Aemon. Aemon tells him about the second bird. It came from further south, from a maester in a holdfast that flies Lannister-allied banners. Aemon summarizes it, the way he summarizes all terrible things, which is quietly and without softening. The Red Wedding, the twins. Robb Stark was betrayed at a feast that was supposed to be a peace. Roose Bolton drove a blade into him at close range. Catelyn Stark's throat was cut. The northern host was slaughtered in the night. Roose Bolton has been named Warden of the North by King's Landing. Jon does not speak. He takes the second message from Aemon's hand and reads it himself. All of it. Every line, even the parts Aemon already told him. Sometimes you have to read something yourself before it becomes real. Sometimes, even then, it does not. He does not cry. He stands at the rookery window with one message in each hand and grips Longclaw's pommel. The direwolf head, carved in pale stone, is cold against his palm. The Valyrian steel is colder still. Jorah Mormont gave him this sword. Jorah Mormont is dead. Robb Stark is dead. Ghost presses against his leg and is silent, as Ghost always is. Aemon does not fill the quiet. He stands close and breathes slowly and lets the grief have the shape it needs. He has been at the war for 80 years. He has stood in silences like this one before, and he knows what they require, which is space before words. Jon thinks about Robb. He thinks about a boy who loved their father openly and laughed too loudly and became a king because a kingdom needed someone to be won. He thinks about how Robb won every battle he was given and then lost to a dinner table and a song played at exactly the wrong moment. He thinks about the other message still in his left hand. A Tully is riding north, toward him, with something connected to what Robb was doing, or what Robb carried, or what Robb left behind. Jon does not know what that something is yet. He does not know if knowing would help. Aemon speaks first. He says that someone is coming north with something the last of Jon's kin was connected to, and that Jon will have to decide what he is when that person arrives. He says it plainly, without edge or urgency. Jon's answer comes quickly. It comes the way answers come when they have lived inside you long enough to need no preparation. He took his vows. He says the line, "I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post." He says he knew what those words meant when he spoke them on a cold night in front of the men of Castle Black. He still knows what they mean. Aemon is quiet for a long moment. Ghost breathes at Jon's heel. Then the old man says, "The question is never what you are, Jon Snow. It is what you must do." He does not elaborate. He does not need to. Jon folds the two messages and presses them inside his cloak against his chest. He leaves the rookery with Longclaw at his hip and Ghost at his heel, and no answer to what Aemon asked him. He has the wall at his back. He has his duty in front of him. He has the sound of his dead brother's name on a piece of paper passed between strangers. And somewhere south of the wall, a Tully is riding toward him through roads that are no longer safe. Jon does not know what comes next. For now, that will have to be enough. They come through the gate at midday, 5 men on 5 horses, road-worn past the point where road-worn becomes something else. They left the neck with 6 men and 6 horses. Whatever took the 6th, no one at Castle Black will learn today. The men carry no banners. They wear no sigils. The grey-haired man at the front sits his horse the way old soldiers do, not comfortably, not with any ease, but with the patience of a man who has decided that comfort is a question for other people in other lifetimes. The gate sergeant looks at them and does not know what to make of them. He sends a runner-up for the Lord Commander, then remembers there is no Lord Commander, and sends the runner for Jon Snow instead. Jon comes down from the wall in his black cloak, Ghost moving at his heel without a sound. The cold follows him off the wall the way cold does up here, not like wind but like a presence, a weather of its own that the wall has been making for 8,000 years and intends to keep making long after every man standing below it is gone. He looks at the 5 riders. The grey-haired man looks back at him. Neither of them speaks yet. The gate sergeant watches both of them and decides it is not his business and goes back to his post. They move to the common hall. Someone brings food that neither of them touches and wine that neither of them pours. The hall is cold and it smells of tallow and old wood and the particular staleness of a place where men have been living without women or comfort for a very long time. Jon and the grey-haired man sit across a table from each other and look at each other for a moment, the way strangers do when they are trying to decide how much of what they see can be trusted. The grey-haired man is Sir Brynden Tully, called the Blackfish. He is lean and tough, and his eyes are still sharp in a face that has been weathered past the point of weathering further. He has the bearing of a soldier who has long ago stopped being surprised by what war asks of men and simply does what it asks. He looks at Jon's face, at the dark curly hair and the grey eyes, and he sees the stark in him the same way you see a family in the set of a jaw or the stillness of a gaze. Jon is younger than he expected, 17 years old, sitting in a black cloak with a Valyrian steel sword at his hip and the bearing of someone who has already been tested past what most men his age will face in a lifetime. Neither of them is the kind of man who performs warmth. There is no warmth between them. There is no time for it. The Blackfish sets a cloth bundle on the table. He unfolds it slowly and without ceremony, the way you handle something that has been too important for too long to need ceremony now. The crown sits on the cloth between them. It is a hammered bronze circlet incised with runes of the first men, surmounted by 9 black iron spikes shaped like long swords, made to resemble the crowns of the ancient kings in the north who ruled for 8,000 years before a Targaryen dragon ever crossed the narrow sea. Jon looks at it. He does not touch it. Ghost sits at Jon's side and does not look at it at all. The direwolf is utterly still, utterly silent, the way he always is, as if he has made a decision about the world that does not require him to announce it. Then the Blackfish speaks. He tells Jon everything, in the flat voice of a man who has told terrible things before, and knows the only mercy is not to slow down in the telling. He tells him about the wedding at the Twins, about the phrase and the feast and the music starting, the rains of Castamere rising in the hall the way a tide rises. Slow, and then, all at once. He tells him about the doors barring. He tells him about Robb, stabbed again and again before Roose Bolton put his own blade in and said the Lannisters send their regards. He tells him about Catelyn, her throat cut at the end after she had already lost everything else there was to lose. He tells him about Talisa, stabbed at the table. He tells him about Grey Wind, killed in the outer yard before the wolf ever had a chance to reach his master. He tells him about 12,000 men, most of them dead, in a single night under a host's roof, after bread and salt had passed between them, after guest, right had been given and accepted under the old gods and the new. Jon does not move during all of this. He sits with his hands flat on the table, and he does not move. Ghost is absolutely still beside him. When the Blackfish finishes, the common hall holds nothing but cold air and silence. Then the Blackfish makes his case. His voice does not change. He says what he has come to say, the same way he said everything else, without heat, without performance, simply placing the facts where Jon can see them. Jon Snow is the last Stark male any of them know to be alive. Robb is dead. Bran and Rickon have not been heard from since Winterfell burned. And a man could fill a graveyard with what he does not know about where they are breathing. Sansa is a prisoner in King's Landing. Arya is gone, swallowed by whatever the world swallows girls in wartime. The crown is here. It was made to sit on a Stark's head, made to look like what it looks like, and the only Stark within riding distance of a northern army is Jon Snow. Guessed, right was violated at the Twins. Every man in the north who takes the old gods seriously knows what that violation means, knows what it demands, knows the weight it places on anyone who would answer it. The argument exists. The crown exists. The only thing missing is the man willing to wear it. Jon says he took a vow. He does not say it loudly. He says it the way you say something you have already decided and do not intend to revisit. He looks at the crown when he says it, and then he looks at the Blackfish. He recites the words exactly, the way his father, Ned Stark, taught him words should be handled, exactly, without softening or reordering. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. He says he knew what those words cost when he said them. He says his father died on a scaffold in King's Landing because he would not bend what he believed to fit what powerful men wanted. He says his father taught him that a man who breaks his word under pressure is not a man who had a word to begin with. He is not breaking his vow because the world got harder. The world getting harder is not a release from anything. The Blackfish hears this. He is quiet for a moment. He considers it the way a man considers a locked door, not for long, but carefully, looking for the hinge. Then he says that a vow sworn to an institution with no head is a vow sworn into the air. The Lord Commander is dead. Jorah Mormont was murdered by his own men at Craster's Keep, and no one has replaced him. And the Watch exists now as a body of men in black, arguing over precedent in a castle that gets colder every night. There is no Lord Commander to administer the oath. There is no one to enforce it, and no one to release Jon from it by any proper means, and no one to punish its breach by any proper means either. The institution the oath was sworn to has ceased to function at its highest level. The words still exist. The obligation they describe does not attach to anything with a living face. Jon starts to answer. The Blackfish cuts him off. Not rudely, just finally, the way you close a door you have considered leaving open and decided not to. He says, I've run before. I'm not running again. He says it quietly, without anger. The way you say something that has been true of you for so long, it has stopped needing emphasis. He ran from the twins in the dark with the sound of the rains of Castamere still in his ears. He ran through the riverlands and through the neck and through every mile of Bolton-watched country between the twins and this wall. He ran north because there was something north worth running to. He is not leaving Castle Black without an answer. He can wait. He is very good at waiting. He has had a great deal of practice. Jon looks at the crown for a long moment. He looks at the 9 black iron spikes and the hammered bronze and the runes of a people who built a kingdom and held it for 8,000 years. He looks at it the way you look at something you cannot allow yourself to want. He says nothing. Then he stands, pushes back from the table, and walks out of the common hall into the cold outside. He does not say another word. Ghost follows him out without a sound. The crown stays on the table. The Blackfish watches him go and does not call after him. He does not look surprised. He does not look disappointed. He sits back in the chair and stretches his bad leg out and waits. Outside, the wind moves along the base of the wall. Inside, the crown sits between the empty cups and the untouched food and the 2 candles that are burning down toward nothing. The Blackfish has nowhere else to be. 3 days pass, and the crown sits covered on the common hall table where the Blackfish left it. Jon does his duties. He oversees the garrison, checks the wall, watches the northern horizon for signs of Mance Raider's host moving through the grey distance beyond the ice. He does not talk about the crown. He does not look at it when he passes through the hall. He treats it the way men treat things they have not yet decided about, which is to say, he gives it no room in his actions, while giving it every room in his mind. The Blackfish stays in the quarters the Watch gave him. He sharpens his sword. He asks for nothing. He does not press Jon, does not seek him out in the yard, or the training grounds, or at the evening meal. He is a man who has been patient before, and knows patience is not weakness. The other men of the watch know that something is happening, the way men living in close quarters always know when the air has changed, but most of them do not know what. A few have seen the crown. None of them know what to make of it. The garrison goes about its business, and Jon Snow goes about his duty, and when he and the Blackfish pass each other in the yard, they do not meet each other's eyes. On the fourth morning, Maester Aemon asks Jon to come sit with him, not in the rookery, where the ravens shift and mutter in their cages, and the smell of bird and old parchment is thick in the air. In Aemon's own quarters, which are small and kept warm by a fire burning low in the grate, because the old man feels the cold, even when summer is not yet gone from the rest of the world. Aemon is ancient. His eyes are long gone white, the colour of old milk, and he listens to Jon enter and take a seat, and he listens to Jon's breathing for a long moment before he speaks. The way men who cannot see learn to read what their eyes can no longer reach. He does not give Jon advice. He tells Jon something about himself instead. He says, "I am a Targaryen. Most men who know anything real about Castle Black know this, though few say it aloud." He lets that sit for a moment. Then he tells Jon what it means. When Maekar I died, and a great council was called to decide who would sit the Iron Throne, Aemon was among those considered. The throne was offered to him. He refused it. He would not have it. The throne passed to his younger brother Aegon, the fifth of that name, a man called the Unlikely because no one expected him to be king, and no one had prepared him to be one. Aemon took a maester's chain instead, and learned the arts of healing and correspondence, and the keeping of records. And eventually, the chain led him to the wall, and the wall has been his world ever since. He says, "I am not sorry." He says it plainly, without performance. "I have never been sorry." He says that in the long years at Castle Black, in the dark of winter and the long pale light of summer, he has wondered. He has wondered whether the realm needed the man at the wall more than it needed the man on the throne. He has wondered whether refusing the crown was wisdom, or whether it was a different kind of pride, dressed in humble clothing. He says he does not know the answer. He has had 80 years to think about it, and he still does not know. "I chose the wall. I do not know if I was right. I only know I chose it fully, and I do not regret the choosing. That is the only thing you can know. When you choose, that you are choosing fully." Jon leaves without answering. Aemon does not need an answer. The old man settles back in his chair by the fire, and Jon walks out into the cold of the yard, and Aemon already knows, from 80 years of listening to men breathe, that Jon is working towards something. He only needs more time to find it. That same evening, Sam finds Jon in the armory. Jon is going through equipment that does not need to be gone through, checking buckles and straps that were checked 2 days ago and will not have changed, which is the thing Jon does when he is thinking about something he cannot say out loud. Sam is his best friend at the war, the person in this frozen place Jon trusts most. He is a big, soft-spoken man who is afraid of almost everything, and somehow keeps showing up anyway, and he stands in the doorway of the armory for a moment, watching Jon before he comes in. Sam tries once and stops. He tries again. "I can't tell you to break your vow, but Robb was your brother. The crown was his. I don't know what the gods think about any of this, Jon. I only know what I think. And I don't think you're the kind of man who could live with doing nothing." Then Sam leaves him with it, because that is also what friends know how to do. Jon goes back to Aemon's quarters the next morning. He has been turning a question over in his mind, the way you turn a stone, looking for what lives underneath it. He sits down across from the old man and asks it plainly, "If there is no Lord Commander, Who administers the oath? Who has the authority to release a brother of the watch from his vows? He needs to know whether a legal path exists that he has not seen. Amon answers him precisely, the way he does everything. Traditionally, only the Lord Commander can release a man from his vows. There is no Lord Commander, so there is no formal release available. And, since there is no Lord Commander, there is also no one with the proper authority to formally punish a breach. The vow exists. The institution that enforces it does not currently have a head to give the enforcement weight. He pauses. The fire shifts in the grate. There is only the vow itself and the man who took it. The vow is real. The question is whether the man is real too. John does not answer that either. He goes back to the wall. A raven arrives from the south that afternoon. It does not come from a loyalist farmer or a minor holdfast. It comes from a Lannister-aligned maester near White Harbor, and it is addressed to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Since there is no Lord Commander, it goes to the senior officer on duty, which today is Alistair Thorne. Thorne brings it to the common hall with the look of a man who has found something useful. He reads it aloud. The message is clear. A man known as the Blackfish, uncle to the traitor house of Tully, is traveling north and is believed to be carrying property stolen from the crown. Any lord or officer who harbors him is in rebellion against King Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name. The Night's Watch is reminded of its ancient obligation to honor all kings and obey none, which the message makes plain means not providing shelter to enemies of the throne. Thorne reads it to the end, and then folds it with satisfaction and sets it on the table near the covered crown, and the men in the hall look at each other and do not speak. That night, Jon climbs to the top of the wall. Ghost moves beside him on the ice, white against the dark, silent as always. They stand at the edge of the world, and Jon looks south. Somewhere in the darkness is the north. Somewhere in the north is Winterfell, burned down to its bones, a ruin held by men who earned it by betrayal. Rose Bolton sat at Robb's feast and opened the doors and stabbed the host who trusted him, and someone nearby said the Lannisters send their regards before Robb Stark fell. And after that, the Boltons were named Wardens of the North and given everything the Starks had built over generations of cold and blood and keeping faith. Jon's father, Ned Stark, was beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor on Joffrey's order. He was a man who believed that doing right and doing lawfully were the same thing. And he found out at the end that they are not always. And by the time he found it out, there was no path left to him. The Night's Watch oath says he shall wear no crowns and win no glory. It says he shall take no part in the wars of men. The Watch's neutrality is meant to be a gift to the realm. Promise that the men on the wall stand apart from the politics that tear kingdoms in half, that they can be trusted because they belong to no lord and no house and no throne. That principle works when the governance below the wall is something worth standing apart from in good faith. It breaks down when the men claiming authority over the realm are the ones pulling it apart piece by piece and calling the wreckage their own. Jon does not say any of this aloud. He stands on the wall in the dark with Ghost beside him, looking south into nothing, and the decision that has been forming in him for 3 days settles a little closer to solid. Jon climbs to the top of the wall alone, in the dark, and the cold hits him the way it always hits him up here. Not as a temperature, but as a presence. Something old and patient and indifferent to whatever a man decides to do. Ghost is beside him on the ice, white against the black of the night, his red eyes open and fixed on nothing in particular. There is no wind. There is almost never wind when it is this cold. The wall groaned sometimes in the deep cold, the ice settling against itself, the sound low and vast and coming from everywhere at once. Tonight it is silent. Even the wall is waiting. John looks south. He cannot see much. The darkness below the wall's south face runs into more darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, the north stretches away through hill and forest and river valley down to the ruins of Winterfell, and the men who hold them, and all the things, the Starks, built over 8,000 years, that have been taken apart in a single season. He can see the lights of Castle Black below, a handful of torches against the dark, small from up here, the way everything looks small from the top of the wall. He looks north. The haunted forest covers the ground below the far side of the wall, the tree line black against a sky dense with stars. And beyond the tree line, the darkness goes on without end, patient and cold and full of things that do not care about Jon Snow or his decisions. This is the wall, 700 feet of ice, built to hold back what comes from the north. Jon has sworn his life to it. He stands on top of it in the dark and tries to understand what he is about to do. He works through it carefully, the way you work through something, when you know the conclusion you are moving toward and you are still trying to be honest with yourself about whether it is the right one. The Night's Watch exists to protect the realm of men from what lies beyond the wall. That is its entire purpose. Everything else, the black cloaks, the vows, the towers, the ravens, the patrols, is in service of that purpose. But the realm of men includes the north. The north is where the Watch gets its recruits, where its supply chains run, where its political ground sits. Without the North's lords sending men to take the Black, Castle Black empties out. Without northern grain and cattle, the Watch starves. The Watch does not exist apart from the North. It is a thing the North sustains. If the Boltons lock the North into permanent Lannister rule, the Watch becomes a tool of the Iron Throne. Every Raven Reed, every commander's decision second-guessed. Every man who comes to take the Black first, vetted by Bolton agents. Roose Bolton, as Warden of the North, puts Lannister eyes permanently on Castle Black. The survival of the Wall and the independence of the North are not separate questions. They are the same question. Jon has been standing on the wall in the dark, telling himself they are separate. They are not. He does not find a way around the oath. He is not going to find a way around it. There is no loophole in "I shall wear no crowns and win no glory." There is no interpretation of those words that makes putting Robb's crown on his head consistent with the vow he spoke at Castle Black in front of men he called brothers. He has tried to find one. He has spent 3 days trying. The oath does not bend. Oaths do not bend. You either keep them or you break them, and you either own what you have broken or you spend the rest of your life pretending you did not. He is not going to pretend. He is going to break it. He knows he is going to break it. He stands on the ice, and he names it plainly to himself, without softening and without qualification. He is going to be an oath-breaker. He is going to do the thing the oath forbids, knowing it is forbidden, for a reason he believes is worth the cost. That is not a loophole. That is a choice. He makes it. Ghost does not react. Ghost never reacts. He sits on the ice beside Jon, like something carved out of snow and starlight, and his red eyes reflect the darkness to the north. The common hall is empty when Jon comes in before dawn, except for the Blackfish, who is awake at the table, with a cup of something warm, and the crown still covered in cloth in front of him. The fire at the far end of the hall has burned down to coals. Jon sits across from the Blackfish, and he does not touch the crown yet. He looks at the covered shape of it for a moment. "I've thought about this for 3 days," he says. "I know." The Blackfish says, "I'm not doing it because I want to be a king. I'm doing it because the North needs a Stark and there's no one else. That's enough, the Blackfish says. Jon looks at him. Is it? The Blackfish sets down his cup. He says it plainly, without drama, the way he says everything. It was enough for Robb. He never wanted to be a king either. He wanted his father back, and he wanted justice. He got neither, but he was still worth following. He pauses for a moment. So are you. Jon reaches across the table and picks up the crown. He pulls back the cloth himself. The bronze is cold in his hands, colder than he expected. Cold from sitting in the night air of Castle Black. Cold the way old metal always is. The 9 iron spikes, shaped like long swords, are rough to the touch, hammered into shape by a smith who lived and died before the Andals ever crossed the narrow sea. The runes of the first men, incised into the circlet worn smooth by generations of handling. He holds it in both hands, and he does not put it on yet. He sits there, in the grey pre-dawn of Castle Black, holding the crown of the kings in the north, and he says nothing, because there is nothing left to say that matters more than what he is already doing. By morning, the garrison knows. Alliser Thorne comes to the common hall with the full force of his contempt and his lifelong hostility to Jon Snow, and he calls it what he believes it is: treason. Treason against the Watch. Treason against the king on the Iron Throne. He says Jon will be remembered as the man who broke the Watch's oath in the name of a bastard's ambition, that everything Jon has done, from the ranging to the Fist of the First Men, to the battles on the wall, has been in service of this moment, this choice, this betrayal. He says he will send a raven to the Iron Throne before Jon clears the gate. Jon does not argue with him. He does not stop him either. Send it, Jon says. Tell them where I am. I'll be gone before they can send anyone north. Thorne has nothing to say to that. He says it anyway, because Thorne always has something to say. But Jon is already done listening. In the common hall, before the men who chose to gather and hear him, Jon states it plainly. He is leaving the Watch's service. He is not claiming the Watch has released him. He is not claiming his oath has been dissolved by Mormont's death at Craster's Keep, or by the fact that no Lord Commander stands confirmed at Castle Black. He is claiming none of that. He knows what the oath says. He knows what he swore. He is choosing to break it with full knowledge of what he is breaking, and the weight of that belongs to him alone. He is not putting it on Mormont's memory, or on the Watch's vacant seat of command, or on the state of the realm. It is his weight, and he carries it out the gate. He unsheathes Longclaw and sets it on the table in front of the assembled men. He looks at it there for a moment. Mormont gave him that sword. Mormont carved the bear from the pommel and put a direwolf there instead, for Jon, because Jon had earned it. He picks it back up. The Watch can come for it if they want it. He will be in the north. Some of the men nod. Some look at the floor. A few hold his gaze, and he holds theirs, and something passes between them that does not need words. Thorne is still talking somewhere in the back of the hall. The Blackfish watches from the doorway, saying nothing, which is everything. Outside Castle Black's gate, in the grey northern light of early morning, the Blackfish holds the crown out to Jon with both hands, the cloth folded away. Jon takes it. He looks at it once more, the bronze circlet, the 9 iron longswords pointing up, the first men runes worked into the metal by hands, 8,000 years gone. And then he lifts it and puts it on his head. Just for a moment, long enough to feel the weight of 9 iron points settle against his dark hair and understand that the weight is real and belongs to him now, whatever happens next, whatever the North costs him. Then he takes it off and holds it at his side. The crown does not make him a king. The North will decide that, if he can reach them, if he can give them a reason. I'm not a king yet, he says. I have to earn it. The Blackfish says nothing. He does not need to. Ghost sits at Jon's heel on the frozen ground outside the wall, white and still, and absolutely silent. The rookery at Castle Black smells of old feathers and cold stone, and the particular must of birds that have lived their entire lives in a single tower. Jon stands at the writing table near the window, while the Blackfish reads each message before it is tied. The grey morning light comes through the slit in the wall, just enough to see by. Jon writes in a steady hand, keeps the letters small, keeps the words fewer than they need to be. The Blackfish holds each strip of parchment up to the light and reads it twice and says whether it is right. Too long and a message can be intercepted and decoded by the wrong hands. Too short, and it sounds like a man pleading from a corner. The line between those two things is narrow, and the Blackfish has been navigating narrow lines his whole life. The message is plain. Robb Stark's crown survived the Red Wedding. Jon Snow, last of the Starks, carries it north. The guest right of the old gods and the new was violated at the Twins. Any lord who values the ancient law is asked to remember what was done there, and what that law demands of men who still live under the eyes of the gods. That is all. That is enough. Or it is not. The ravens go out in the grey morning, a dozen birds lifting off the rookery ledge, one after another, and banking south and west into the pale sky. Jon watches them until they are too small to see. He does not know how many will come back answered. He does not let himself think about the ones that will not. The Blackfish raises the hard thing while they are still in the rookery, because that is how the Blackfish operates. He does not wait for problems to find him. He raises it plainly. The men who receive those messages will ask what right a Snow has to the crown. The name Snow is a bastard name. Every man in the north knows what it means. A bastard cannot inherit unless a sitting king legitimizes him, and there is no king with the authority to do that. Not for Jon. Not now. Northern lords bent the knee to Robb, because Robb was a Stark. Jon is half a Stark at best, and that is being generous about which half. Jon's answer is already in the message, which is why the message was written the way it was. The Northern lords are not being asked to recognize a legal inheritance. They are not being asked to affirm a bloodline or a claim through the law of the realm. They are being asked to acclaim a Stark, the way their ancestors acclaimed Starks for 8,000 years before the Targaryens ever crossed the sea. The crown is not a thing Jon is inheriting. It is a burden he has agreed to carry, because someone must, and he is the one still standing when the others fell. Robb became king by acclamation of his lords, not by law. Jon is asking for the same thing. Not a legal recognition, but a choice made by free lords who remember what they owe the old gods and what those gods witnessed done at the Twins. The Blackfish listens to this and nods once. He says it will work on some of them. Jon says he knows it will not work on all of them. The Blackfish says that is all right. 4 days later, a raven comes back. It is from a small holdfast north of the Neck. The lord there lost brothers and fathers and sons to Walder Frey's hospitality. The families of his men never got the bodies back. The message is 3 words. We remember. Coming. The lord has 40 men. Jon reads the message 3 times, standing at the table in the common hall, with the morning fire burning low behind him. Ghost lies near the hearth, white and still, making no sound. 40 men is not an army, but every army that ever existed was once 40 men, and a reason. And the reason here is as old as anything in the north. The Blackfish takes the message, when Jon holds it out and sets it on the table with the same deliberateness he sets everything down. He does not say anything. He does not need to. They cannot stay at Castle Black. The Blackfish makes this case that same evening, without sentiment or apology. The Watch will not shelter them. Thorn has made his position clear, and he is not wrong on the facts. Jon has formally left, and there is no provision in 8,000 years of tradition for housing a king-in-waiting inside the Lord Commander's walls. The Lannister raven that Thorn sent south has already reached King's Landing, or is close to it, carried fast by a bird that was fed and rested before it flew. Roose Bolton will be moving the moment he has confirmation of what is happening at the wall. They need walls of their own. They need supply. They need access to more men than they can gather here at the edge of the world. There is only one place in the north that has all three. White Harbor, the only proper city north of the Neck, the seat of a lord who has kept his own counsel since the Red Wedding, who has said the things a man in his position must say while doing something else entirely behind the closed doors of his great hall. The Blackfish says nothing specific about that lord's loyalties. He does not need to say anything specific. Jon agrees to the plan. They march for White Harbor when 60 men have assembled. Not before, not a man less. Jon raises the thing the Blackfish has not asked about, because the Blackfish is from the Riverlands and has not stood on the wall in the dark watching the northern horizon the way Jon has. He tells the Blackfish about Mance Rayder, about 90 tribes of wildlings moving south out of lands that have been cold and dark for longer than they should be. Men and women and children who have walked hundreds of miles because something is gathering in the far north that frightens them more than steel and more than the wall. Jon has been among them. He has eaten at their fires and heard their reasons. He knows what they are running from, and he knows they are not wrong about it. He says, the living need to stop killing each other before what is coming from beyond the wall reaches them. The wildlings, moving south, are not the enemy. They are simply ahead of the enemy by a season or two, and when that season runs out, every man south of the wall will wish he had listened sooner. The Blackfish hears this with the expression of a man who has just added a very large and unwanted number to an already complicated sum. He says he will take Jon's word for it. He says they will deal with it when they must deal with it. That is the most the Blackfish ever offers, and Jon has learned it is more than it sounds. Jon passes a message through the gate sergeant he trusts, a steady northerner who takes the old gods seriously, who has served at the wall long enough to know that the cold beyond it is not the same cold as the cold on this side. The message goes out toward the nearest point where the wildling host's forward scouts are likely to be. It is simple and short. Jon Snow is no longer a crow. He is asking for a parley, not a fight. Any wildling captain who wants to talk should come to the south side of the wall and ask for Jon Snow by name. He does not know if anyone will come. He sends the message anyway. By the time the 40 men from the Holdfast arrive at Castle Black, the company has grown further. 7 men from the Watch, not deserters in the ordinary sense. Men who heard Jon speak in the common hall and made a decision that morning about what their oath actually meant. They had joined to protect the North. Protecting the North now means something different than it did when they took the Black. They follow Jon out of the gate without ceremony, without drama, each man carrying what he can carry. A handful of men from the Blackfish's original company, still road-hardened from the long ride through the Neck, who have followed the old knight this far and see no reason to stop. The new 40, raw with a grief still too recent to have settled into anything they can name. 60 men near enough. Jon stands in the yard before they ride and looks at them in the thin morning light. Ghost moves through the group quietly, touching no one, making no sound, his red eyes calm and steady. Jon does not give a speech. He is not a man who gives speeches to 60 men standing in the cold. He says they are riding for White Harbor. He says they will pick up more on the way. Then he mounts his horse, and the Blackfish rides up beside him, and they go south together through the gate. 60 men filing out 2 abreast, onto the road that leads away from the wall and toward whatever the north will decide to become. The crown rides wrapped in a cloak against the Blackfish's body, the hammered bronze and the iron spikes pressing into his ribs through the cloth. The same place it has ridden since the night they left the twins, and everything changed. Rose Bolton does not panic when the news arrives. That is one of the things that makes him dangerous. A man who panics makes noise, and noise can be tracked and anticipated. The news comes through 2 channels within a day of each other. A raven from Thorn at Castle Black, careful language that names Jon Snow's departure without calling it desertion. And a rider from a northern patrol, reporting 60 men moving south, under no banner. Roose sets both messages on the table and looks at them without speaking. Then he calls for Steelshanks Walton and gives the order. 200 horse, light cavalry, fast animals that have been fed and rested. They are not to engage at White Harbor, not inside the city walls, where Manderley has eyes and the guilds have memory. They are to take the King's Road, north of the city. A company of 60 men moving south in open country is not an army. Cavalry catches infantry in the open, and that is the end of it. Walton asks no questions. That is why Roose uses him. Jon does not know about Walton, but he knows Bolton will move, because the Blackfish told him so, and the Blackfish has never been wrong about the kind of men who hold power by force. They are 90 now, not 60. 30 more joined on the road south, in 2 separate groups, a dozen from a holdfast that lost its male lion at the Red Wedding, and a score of hunters and small folk from a village whose lord was found hanged from his gatehouse after refusing to quarter Bolton soldiers. The Blackfish keeps the column tight, 2 abreast, flankers in the trees at 30-yard intervals. They do not move fast. Fast movement on a road in hostile country is how a column walks into something it cannot walk back from. Ghost ranges ahead, disappearing into the tree line for stretches and returning without sound. Twice on the road south, the wolf returned, with ears flat, and held still between Jon and the northern tree line, while Bolton patrols past without seeing the company in the brush. Jon does not command any of this. The wolf does what the wolf does, and it has proven useful more than once. On the 3rd afternoon south of their cached supplies, Ghost does not return on his usual interval. Jon is at the column's head when he notices it. He raises his fist without speaking, and the column stops. The Blackfish is already scanning the tree line in slow arcs when Ghost comes out of the southern tree line at a walk. White coat, marked at the muzzle, and 1 forepaw with something dark and damp. He comes to Jon and sits. He does not make any sound. The Blackfish says quietly, "Off the road. Now." The column moves into the eastern tree line in under 2 minutes. The Blackfish runs it the way a man runs a drill he has performed 100 times, which he has not, but some things a soldier does not need to drill. He takes Jon aside, while the men muffle the bridles with their cloaks and settle the horses. He says, "Bolton cavalry, heavy and fast, expecting to find a rabble in the open." He says, "Cavalry in the open beats infantry in the open every time." He says, "The road is the trap now, not the danger." They are going to make it the trap. Jon takes the eastern tree line. The Blackfish takes the western. The King's Road between them is 30 feet of packed earth, with open sky above it. The Blackfish sends 3 men back to scuff boot prints into the surface and overturn a water skin in the dirt so the ground looks recently abandoned. Then he goes into the western trees and gives the order for silence. They wait nearly an hour. The horses breathe slowly. The men do not speak. Jon stands with long claw in hand, 10 feet back from the road's edge, hidden in the shadow of a thick stand of pine. Ghost is beside him, still as carved stone. Jon watches the road's southern bend and thinks about nothing. He has learned that thinking about too much before a fight is how a man gets himself killed in the first moments of one. The sound arrives before the sight, a low drumming through the earth, felt in the boots before the ears catch it. Then, the first Bolton riders come around the southern bend, 2 wide, helmed and armored in Dreadfort colors. They are moving at a fast canter. Walton is behind the leading element, leaning down to read the road. He sees the overturned waterskin. He sees the disturbed earth. He raises his hand to slow the column. They are inside the trap, and they do not know it yet. The Blackfish does not use a signal. He uses timing. Jon hears the western tree line erupt before he sees it, the crash of branches, and the sudden sound of 60 men who have been still for an hour and are now moving with everything they have. He steps out of the eastern tree line at the same moment, and the men behind him spread left and right across the road's eastern shoulder. And then they are into the cavalry from the side, into the horses, into the press of animals and men, with no room to run and no angle to charge. Ghost takes a horse in the throat. The animal goes down screaming, and the horses nearest to it shy and rear, and the leading element folds back on the column behind it. Jon is already through the first line, Longclaw moving in the patterns he drilled in the pre-dawn cold at Castle Black. A rider's horse catches him, and he goes sideways 2 steps, goes low under the second swing, comes up inside the rider's guard. He does not think about it. He moves to the next one. The Bolton officer is in the middle of the column on a grey horse, shouting orders, trying to turn the trailing riders back down the road before the western wing closes the southern exit. He has the right instinct. Jon sees him doing it and moves through the fighting men toward him, not at a run, at a walk with purpose. The officer turns his horse to charge. He has a longer blade and the height of the saddle, and he is a trained cavalryman, and he knows it. Jon steps sideways off the horse's line and puts Longclaw into the rider's side as he passes. The officer drops his sword and rides another 30 feet before he slides from the saddle, and the grey horse keeps going, riderless, around the bend. The Bolton force breaks in the next few minutes. Not all at once, but the way things collapse when the center goes. First a few at the column's rear turning south, then more, then the rest, pushing through whatever gap remained between the western wing and the road's edge. The Blackfish does not pursue. He gives the order to hold and walks the road, checking who can be helped. Jon walks the road with Ghost beside him. The wolf moves slowly, head low, nose working. Jon counts 12 Bolton men down on the road. He counts 4 of his own. He does not feel what he expected to feel, which was something like relief. He feels the cold and the smell of it, and the particular stillness that settles over a place where violence has just stopped. He thinks about the 4 men whose names he will have to know before they are put in the ground. He says to the Blackfish, "We need to move them off the road before we keep south." The Blackfish says, "Yes." They make camp in a hollow half a mile east of the King's Road. Fires screened by the hill's shoulder. Horses picketed in 2 lines. The exhaustion that a fight delays has settled into every man, and they eat without much talking, and see to the wounded, and prepare to move before first light. Jon is sitting at the fire's edge when the sound of horses comes from the north, and every man reaches for a weapon. The riders who come into the firelight are 30 men in rough-spun cloaks on tired animals, a hedge knight at their head with his sword across his saddle, and both hands visible. P says Jon Snow's name as a question before he is 10 feet from the fire. His lord lost 2 nephews and a cousin at the twins. They have been riding 4 days. They heard Jon Snow was moving south, and they want to know if the story about the crown is true. Jon says it is true. The hedge knight looks at him for a long moment. Then he sheathes his sword and dismounts. The men behind him do the same, all 30 of them, pulling saddles and moving toward the fire with the quiet purpose of men who have come a long distance and intend to stay. Jon watches them settle in. 30 more faces in the firelight. 30 more men who decided that the Red Wedding was a debt that had not yet been paid. He does not speak to them beyond what is necessary. He lets them eat and rest. There will be time for words later. Ghost lies down at the fire's edge. The orange light catches the white of his coat and holds it. The wolf is still and quiet, and his red eyes are calm in the dark, and he makes no sound at all, watching the tree line the way he has watched every tree line since they left the wall. Patient and waiting for whatever comes next to show itself. 120 men sleep in the hollow that night. The King's Road is empty beyond the hill's shoulder, and somewhere south of it the road runs on toward White Harbor. The field south of the frozen river is the Blackfish's choice. He rides the ground at dawn, reading the eastern ridge above the tree line, reading the river's frozen face to the north, reading the width of the open ground between. When he comes back, he tells Jon what he sees. A good field for a smaller force that wants to choose when the engagement starts. The ridge gives cover for mounted riders. The river behind the Bolton line will crowd their retreat. The open ground in the center is long enough that a cavalry charge will have spent half its momentum before it arrives. Jon listens and then asks what the Blackfish needs from him. The Blackfish says, "Hold the center. Do not move forward until I move first from the ridge. Do not let them see you doubt the line." Jon says, "And Ghost?" The Blackfish looks at the wolf standing white against the brown grass. He says, "Let him do what he does." They have 340 men by the morning of the battle. Not all of them are soldiers in the trained sense. Some are farmers who lost fathers at the twins. Some are hunters whose lords are dead or turned to Bolton colors. Some are men of the Night's Watch who decided their oath to the north meant something specific on this particular morning. 14 are wildling scouts who came to the parley Jon sent for and agreed, after 2 hours of talk, that a living enemy on this side of the wall was worth fighting before the dead enemy beyond it reached them. They take the north flank. The Bolton host is larger. Roose has pulled levies from across the north, from every holdfast and castle, but flies pink and wears the flayed man. They number perhaps 600, cavalry heavy in the center and on both flanks, infantry in depth behind. Their banners come over the field's southern rise in the cold morning air, the flayed man on pink moving in the wind. They know they outnumber Jon's host. They are not afraid. Jon stands at the center of his line, with Longclaw in his hand, the dark Valyrian steel blade catching no light in the grey morning. Ghost is beside him, 3 feet at the shoulder, white as the frost on the grass. Still, the wolf watches the Bolton line advance with the flat, red attention of an animal that does not know what fear is. The men on either side of Jon stand a little wider apart than they would otherwise, giving the wolf its room without acknowledging that they are doing it. The Bolton cavalry center moves first, a controlled canter, not a full charge yet, feeling the ground. Jon watches them come and keeps his breathing even. He has told the line to hold until the cavalry is 200 yards out. 200 yards is where a horse that has been running for a third of a mile starts to slow. 200 yards is where the Blackfish rides off the ridge. Jon watches the gap close. He has made himself not look at the ridge since he took his position, because looking at it would tell the Bolton commanders that something is coming from that direction. He watches the flayed man on pink get larger, and the hooves get louder, and he puts his hand on Ghost's back once, briefly, not to hold the wolf, but to feel the warmth of him. And then he lifts Longclaw, and the line steps forward together. Ghost goes first. The wolf crosses the gap between the lines at a pace that is not quite a run, loose and effortless, the kind of movement that makes distances disappear. The leading Bolton riders see him at 30 yards, and 2 of them veer off immediately, their horses shying hard to the left without being steered, the animals reacting to something their riders cannot fully control. A 3rd horse goes down when its rider overcorrects. The men behind them have to split around the fallen horse, and the tight cavalry formation opens up the way a fist opens when you cut the tendons in the wrist. And that is when the Bolton center arrives at John's line, already broken into pieces rather than a war. John goes into the gap between 2 riders whose horses have moved apart. Longclaw is a short blade for a lord's weapon, but it is Valyrian steel, and it does the work it is asked to do. He is thinking about nothing except where the next threat is, and where his feet are. The line around him is holding, making no ground but giving no ground, keeping the Bolton horsemen from getting through and reforming. Ghost moves through the fighting without sound, and men and horses move away from the wolf the way they move away from a fire. The sound from the ridge arrives before the riders do, hooves on frozen earth carried down through the trees. Then the Blackfish comes out of the eastern tree line at the head of 80 mounted riders and hits the Bolton right flank at the exact moment the Bolton center is fully committed to. John's position and cannot pull back without collapsing into its own infantry. The timing is as precise as the Blackfish promised. The Bolton right flank has nowhere to go. The frozen river is to the north. The Blackfish is to the east. John's line is in the center, and it is not moving. The sound that rises from John's host does not start as a battle cry. It starts as individual voices and grows into something larger before anyone chooses it. The North remembers. It moves through the line, the way a fire moves through dry grass, 1 voice, and then 10, and then the whole host, giving it back to the field at once. It is the sound of men who have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have finally set it down on someone else. The Bolton right breaks first, then the left, caught between the wildling north flank and the Blackfish's riders swinging around the rear. The center holds longest, because the men in it are the best soldiers Bolton has. When they go fast, the whole center pulling back at once toward Winterfell, leaving their dead in the frost. John does not pursue. He gives the order to hold, and the line holds. He walks the field in the aftermath, and it is never what he expects it to be. He feels the cold and the exhaustion that comes after a fight, and he does not give a speech because there is nothing to say to 340 men on a field of dead. That would not sound hollow. The Blackfish finds him near the center of the field. His right arm is wrapped in a cloth that is dark and wet from above the elbow to the wrist, and he is moving it with the deliberate care of a man who has been told not to. John sees it and says nothing for a moment. Then he says, "You're bleeding on the snow." The Blackfish looks at the blood-stained white around his boots. He says, "Snow's white. It'll wash out." John looks at him. He says, "Someone needs to bind that properly." The Blackfish says, "Someone will. After you stop staring at it like it's the worst thing you've seen today." John lets it go. He stands with the old knight, and they look south together at what the field has become. And then, beyond the field, through the thinning smoke of the cook fires that were Bolton fires an hour ago, at the horizon, there is a shape on it that John knows without needing to be told. He knows every tower of it from memory. from the way it sits against the sky, from the shape that is branded into every Stark who ever grew up inside those walls. It is wrong now. The shape is wrong. Too much sky where there should be stone. Too many gaps. The great keep is a blackened ruin, and the walls that are standing badly, and the towers that remain are not all the towers that were. Ramsay's fire took what Theon's taking spared, and the combination was thorough. Jon says quietly, "It's a ruin." The Blackfish does not look away from the horizon. He says, "So was every kingdom worth building. They were all ruins first." Jon does not answer that. He stands on the field with Longclaw still in his hand, and Ghost white and silent at his side, and he looks at the shape of Winterfell against the northern sky, at the home that is not what it was. And he thinks about his father and all the Starks who held that seat. And he thinks about the cold beyond the wall that is older than all of them. One thing at a time. Winterfell first, then the war. The field is beginning to fill with the sounds of after, men calling to each other, horses being settled, the wounded being carried. The Blackfish puts a hand briefly on Jon's shoulder and then takes it away without speaking. He walks toward the men gathering at the eastern edge of the field, his arm held carefully, his bearing as straight as it was before the blade found him. Jon watches him go. Then he turns and faces north. The crown is wrapped in the Blackfish's cloak, somewhere behind the line. Tomorrow it will come out. Tomorrow there will be choices and men who want things from him. But that is tomorrow. Today the field is his, and the horizon is within reach, and Ghost is beside him, and the north, for the first time since the Red Wedding, is beginning to remember what it is. Winterfell is smaller than Jon remembers. He knows that is not true. The walls are the same walls, the same stone his ancestors cut from the same earth, and walls do not shrink. But the space inside them has changed its proportion because so much of what filled it is gone. The great keep is a burned shell, its upper floors open to the grey sky, its interior colonized by cold and wet, and the particular smell of old fire that does not leave stone quickly. The guards' hall has lost its roof. The broken tower, the one Jon climbed as a boy, the one that has been broken as long as anyone living can remember, is still standing at the same wrong angle it always stood, which is the one unchanged thing in the yard. And Jon looks at it before he looks at anything else. The Boltons left before they could be caught. That is what the Blackfish expected, and what happened. A garrison does not fight to the last man for a ruin, when the cause that placed them there is already retreating toward its next defense. The flayed man banners came down as Jon's host came up the King's Road in the cold morning, and by the time the gates opened, they were already half a day gone. Jon does not pursue. There are things he needs to do inside these walls before he thinks about what happens outside them. He goes to the Godswood before anything else. Ghost follows, which Jon expected. The Godswood is the one part of Winterfell the fire did not reach, and the Boltons did not bother to ruin. Because ruining a Godswood is a kind of trouble that even men without many scruples tend to avoid. The trees are old and dense, and the air inside them is still. The sound of the yard fallen away almost immediately when the first branches close overhead. Jon knows every path through this wood. He has walked all of them in every season, in the dark and in the light, as a child and as a young man. And the paths are the same. The heart tree is at the center, as it always is, the ancient weirwood with its pale bark and its carved face, the wide mouth and the hollow eyes, and the red sap that runs from them like something the tree is trying to say and cannot find words for. Jon kneels in front of it. Ghost settles beside him, white against the grey roots, and is still. John does not pray out loud. He does not know what prayer is supposed to sound like when you are the one doing it instead of watching your father do it. He watched Ned Stark kneel at this tree for years, and he never heard the words, and now he understands that there may not be words, that the old gods do not need them, that whatever passes between a man and the face carved into the weirwood is the same thing whether it is spoken or not. He kneels for a long time. He does not ask for anything. He only stays long enough for the silence to feel complete. The northern lords are assembled in the great yard. When John comes out of the God's Wood, they are not many by the measure of what a kingdom needs, but they are the ones who answered, the ones who decided that the Red Wedding was a debt unpaid, and that a living Stark was worth riding to find. They stand in the yard in their travelling cloaks in the thin morning light, on the ground that is broken stone and old ash, and the memory of what used to be here. And they are quiet in the way men are quiet when they are waiting for something they have made a decision to witness. The Blackfish is with them, arm in a sling, his face the same as it always is. He does not wait for John to come to him. He walks to the center of the yard, the way he walks everywhere, as if the ground were his by right and always has been. He is holding the crown. He has carried it since the twins, and he carries it now for the last time. He holds it out so the lords can see it. The hammered bronze circlet, with the first men runes worn smooth by the hands of the kings who wore it before. The 9 black iron spikes, shaped like long swords, each one pointing at the sky. He does not make a speech. He says what a soldier says. Robb Stark carried this crown. Robb Stark is dead. Guest right was broken at the twins, in violation of the oldest law the gods know. The North needs a king. He holds the crown out to John. John takes it. He holds it in both hands for a moment and feels the weight. The bronze itself is not heavy. The iron spikes are what he feels, each one cold against his palms, each one a long sword in miniature, each one a reminder of what a king in the North is supposed to be, and what it costs to be it. He thinks about Robb, who put this crown on a young man's head and kept it there until the phrase put something else there in its place. He does not think about it for long. There is nothing to think that is not already known. He puts it on his head. The yard is silent for one breath. Then a lord in the front rank says it, not loudly, not as a performance. King in the North. One voice, then 2. Then the sound fills the broken yard, the way water fills a vessel, rising and spreading until it is the only thing in the air. King in the North. King in the North. John stands still in the cold, under the grey sky, with the bronze and iron weight of 8,000 years of Stark rule on his head. And he does not raise his hand, or lift his sword, or do any of the things men in stories do in these moments. He only stands and lets the sound be what it is. Ghost lifts his head. The howl that comes out of the wolf fills the yard, the way the lords' voices could not, goes up into the cold air, over the broken keep, and the burned halls and the ruined towers, and the ancient godswood, the sound of something wild and true at the center of all of it. It is the only sound the wolf has ever made in the presence of any of them, the one exception to a silence that has held since the wall. And it is enough. The Blackfish kneels. He does it before the lords, before the ceremony expects it, before anyone has moved. He lowers himself carefully, in the way of a man with one good arm and a wound that has not finished making itself felt. And he is not graceful about it, and he does not try to be. He meals in the ash and broken stone of Winterfell's great yard, and he does not look away from John as he does it. He has spent 60 years not kneeling to anyone he did not believe in. The long choosing is over. John finds him later at the lip of the crypts, the long stone stairway that goes down into the dark where the kings of winter are interred. The Blackfish is standing at the top of those stairs looking down into nothing in particular, And when Jon comes to stand beside him, he does not say anything right away. After a while, he says, "Your brother was fearless in a way that was almost careless. He went straight at the throat of every problem. The wolf's way. No hesitation. He would have been a great king. He says it plainly, which is the only way the Blackfish says anything. He says, but he made the wrong enemies and he trusted the wrong people." Jon says, "I know." The Blackfish says, "You will have to be different. Not less a Stark, just harder in the places he was not." Jon says nothing to that. He looks down into the dark, where the dead Starks sit, with iron long swords across their laps. His father is down there now, his grandfather. All the line that ended at the twins and began again tonight with a bronze crown and a howl in a ruined yard. He stays at the top of the stairs for a long time. Then he goes back into the castle to see to his men. He climbs to the broken tower before the light fails. It has always been the highest accessible point in Winterfell, titled and broken and open at the top, but from its remaining walls, the view to the north has no equal in the castle. He stands at the gap in the stone and looks out. The land north of Winterfell is flat and wide, field and forest going grey in the late afternoon. And beyond it, at the very edge of what the eye can reach, there is a white line on the horizon, the wall. 300 miles of ice, 700 feet high, old as the first men themselves. He knows what is beyond it. He was beyond it. He stood in the dark and watched the northern horizon and understood that the thing gathering there is older than Stark kings, and older than guest right, and older than the laws of men. A crown does not change that. A king in the north is still a man, and what is coming from beyond the wall cares nothing for crowns or titles or the name of the family that wears them. The north remembers, but winter is coming. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like,